Okay, Mexican borderlands, the Mexican borderlands. What you need to understand is that there's a difference. Everybody thinks about the Alamo, and they think about the Mexican-American War, and they kind of combine these two events. What we've got in this section are two separate wars that are divided by about 10 years. Two separate wars that are divided by about 10 years. The first is the War for Texas Independence, okay, which happens in 1836. The second is the Mexican War, the Mexican-American War, which happens in 1848. Okay, this is it's very different. It's 10 years later, and for 10 years at the end of the War for Texas Independence, Texas is an independent country. It's its own republic. It doesn't become a state until 1845. Until 1845, when James K. Polk is going to annex Texas. This is a picture of the actual Alamo there in San Antonio, Texas. This is the mission where everybody was when Santa Anna brings his armies down. Now, let me give you some background, okay? Sometimes, and I'll probably do it myself, I'll probably make this mistake myself. When you're talking about the War for Texas Independence and the Mexican-American War, the United States is not fighting the Spanish. We're not fighting the Spanish. You see, because what happens in 1824 is that the Mexicans, the Native Americans, are going to run the Spanish off. Their Spanish overlords are going to be run out of the country, and the Mexicans are going to take over. Now, why do we make the mistake of calling them Spanish every once in a while? Why? Because they do speak Spanish, and their culture is Spanish, and everything about but if you remember from the early parts of the semester, when the Spanish came into a territory, they tried to squash all of their cultural identity, and they tried to turn them into little Spaniards, which in some cases they were successful. In other areas they're not as successful, but they do change their religion, they change their culture, they change their language, they change most of their cultural identity is now more closely related to the Spanish than it is with their native ancestors. So, in 1824, after Santa Anna is able to drive out these Spanish overlords, these Western Europeans, because the Spanish are Western Europeans. Okay, you got to remember that. Santa Anna and his people are the Native Americans. When Santa Anna has control of his territory, he looks up into this region where there's a lot of Americans who have come across the Mississippi River to settle in this area. And they settled there when the Spanish were there. The Spanish had encouraged Americans to cross the Mississippi River and come and settle in this area. So these guys, three primary things they're doing in this region. They're growing cotton, because cotton grows well from Georgia all the way across to East Texas. There's also timber. They're cutting all kinds of timber. And they're cattle ranching. There's lots and lots of grazing area for cattle. So these guys are building, they're building cotton plantations, they're building lumber mills, they're building cattle ranches in this whole region. Well, Santa Anna starts putting the pressure on these settlers, okay? Initially, he makes it to where they can't hold public office. They can't be voted into the legislature. Later, he makes it so that they can't actually vote. They're not allowed to vote in the elections. And then, in 1836, Santa Anna is going to declare slavery illegal. Now, Santa Anna still treats all of the Mexicans as if they were his slaves, as if he were an emperor and they were his serfs. But he believes what's going to happen is it's going to force these Texans, as they've started calling themselves, Texicans, he's going to force them out to make them go back across the river. But it doesn't. It has the opposite effect. Because, see, it's not only these Americans who are growing cotton and have these cattle ranches and are running these lumber mills. It's also some of the Mexican natives who have their own plantations, have their own ranches. And when Santa Anna declares slavery illegal, they're all going to rise up. They're all going to rise up, and they're going to run off Santa Anna's little army up there in the north. Now, they believe everything's wonderful. They believe everything's wonderful, and they have accomplished all of their goals. Well, Santa Anna cannot allow this to go unanswered. And so Santa Anna is going to march his troops across the mountains in the dead of winter to come up, and he's going to lay siege to San Antonio. Now, there's a film, a movie. Is it up there, John? Is that it? If we were in class, where am I at?
Lower.
A little bit lower?
Yep.
Okay, if we were in class, I'd be showing you a couple clips out of this. It's the Alamo with Billy Bob Thornton and Dennis Quaid. Excellent piece of historical filmmaking. You can tell because at certain points it gets kind of long and dragged out and a little bit boring, but that's how history is. Usually it's just normal things that are going on. I would recommend you take a look at that film. They do a really good job of laying all this out. Santa Anna sends thousands of troops to encounter about the 130 defenders in the Alamo. What most people don't realize is the Alamo is actually a defeat. The Texans lose the battle of the Alamo. Eventually, as the war goes on, Sam Houston will find a way to corner Santa Anna, and Santa Anna will have to surrender once he's captured. And what the Texans ask for is control over Texas. And so in 1836, as part of the peace settlement, Santa Anna gives to them control of the region called Texas. Now, Santa Anna goes back to Mexico City. What Santa Anna believed he gave to these Texans was this yellow area. This yellow area. What the Texans claim as their own territory is all of this yellow and green striped area. Okay? And so there's plenty of plantations and cattle ranches, and there's all kinds of stuff going on there. And so what's going to happen is eventually, after 10 years, the president is going to be James K. Polk. James K. Polk, another president from Tennessee. Well, let's see. Let me find if I've got the slides. Mr. Polk's War. Okay? Mr. Polk's War is going to be fought with Zachary Taylor and good old Santa Anna there. Winfield Scott is going to be the commander who actually is going to be able to capture Santa Anna the second time in Mexico City. Oh, we'll go back this way. What happens is in 1845, when James K. Polk becomes president, Polk is going to annex the country of Texas and make it a state. The people in Texas wanted to become a state, wanted to become part of the United States. And so when we annex Texas, we annex all of this land, which is area claimed by Santa Anna. This causes the Second War by 1848. By 1846, we are involved in a second war with the Mexicans over that disputed territory. Okay, you can see this battle map. The wars are fought along El Paso, along the trail, the Santa Fe Trail, along the San Diego Trail. We're actually fighting all over this western part of the United States in part of this Mexican-American War. However, it's Winfield Scott who brings his troops down to Veracruz, the same place that Cortez lands. And he basically takes the same route that Cortez takes into Mexico City, and that's where Santa Anna will be captured by Winfield Scott. And at that point, with the peace treaty being signed here, not only do the United States gain this, Texas, but we also gain all of this territory. All of this territory. In an agreement that we make with the British government in 1846, we're also going to come into complete control of this Oregon territory. Okay, now, there's the battle maps from West Point. You can sort of see the campaigns, the different campaigns of the war. Now, following the Mexican-American War, this is what the United States is going to look like. We are going to gain all of this as a result of the end of the war. We gain all of this as a result from our agreement with the British when we draw the final border between the United States and Canada. Now, at this point, the lower 48 look pretty much as they are today. One last thing, as the war is coming to a close, there's a little thing that happens in California, right? You see California. At a place called Sutter's Mill, gold is discovered. Gold is discovered. And so what's going to happen is referred to as the gold rush of 1849. So as we approach 1850, massive populations start flocking to the west. Now, there's already a large population in San Francisco and in San Diego because they're port cities from the Mexicans. They were originally port cities from the Spanish, then they were port cities for the Mexicans, now they're port cities for the United States. But once the gold rush happens, once the gold rush takes place, people start flocking. And actually, between 1849 and 1857, so many people come, there's not a year. At some point, 1852, some people start going back east, but there's not a year when more people go back east than come west. There's always more people coming west looking for gold. Now, part of the reason that California is shaped like this is because of the mountain range, right? They discovered the gold on this side of the mountain, but the people in California believed, well, if there's gold on this side of the mountain, there must be gold on the other side of the mountain, and so they're gonna shape their state based on where those mountain ranges are, in hopes that they're going to find more gold. This gold rush is going to bring enormous numbers of people to the west, to California. Many of them are going to go belly up. They're going to go bust. However, there's a lot of people who get there initially who are going to make their fortunes. In this gold rush. Okay, that's essentially what I wanted to do. I wanted to get us through this part. At this point, you can, on Friday, you can start taking your joy celebration, have it done this weekend, and then we will start with the sectional divide and the trip towards the Civil War as we come back. Okay, see you guys.